recent survey, voters in our town were asked what political party they voted for most often. 600 people indicated they voted Republican. If this represents about 3/5 of the town's votes, how many, I guess is supposed to say, how many voters are in the town? So this is very similar to the one we did before about like the people who voted to approve or whatnot. But now it's backwards. Instead of them giving you the total amount of people who voted, they're kind of giving you like the little piece, but it's the same idea. You have the total number of voters, right? And it says that those 600 people who voted Republican, they represent 3/5. So if I had multiplied the number of voters by 3/5, that is supposed to give me 600. That's supposed to tell me how many people voted Republican. Does this make sense? It's a little backwards to the other ones that we did.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and solve for the variable, solve for voters. This 3/5, the 3 is multiplying, but the 5 is dividing. Okay. So we're going to start by first multiply everything by 5. So here, this 5 and this 5 would go away. So we would have the voters multiplied by 3 is going to equal to 3,000. And now we're going to divide everybody by 3. So finally, the number of voters would equal to 3,000 divided by 3, which would be 1,000. That is the number of voters in this town.
Can you explain the first part, please?
So it's the same idea of what we had in this problem. You multiply the grand total by a fraction to get like the piece. In this problem, it's a little backwards because they gave you the piece, they gave you the fraction, you just didn't know what was the original number. But it's still the same exact concept. You multiply the grand big group by the fraction, and that has to equal the piece. So in this case, the grand number of voters multiplied by the fraction would give you the small number of voters who voted Republican. Any other questions before I go to the next one?
No.
No.
A painter needs 5 gallons of paint to finish a house. He only has 3 quarts and 1 pint. How much more paint does he need? So we're back to a unit conversion. Like I've said before, it is always easier to just go smaller, go to the smaller unit. In this problem, we have gallons, quarts, and pints. So I think it's going to be easiest if we go ahead and just convert everything to pints. And then if we have to change the quarts or to gallons, we can do that. But let's first change everybody to pints. So we have 1 pint, or sorry, 2 pints is equal to 1 quart. And we know that 4 quarts are equal to 1 gallon. So if we're going to go from gallons to pints, we're going to have to multiply times 4 and then again times 2. So that means that to go from gallons to pints, I would have to multiply by 8 because 4 times 2 is 8. So that's the first thing I'm going to do here. I'm going to convert these 5 gallons. I'm going to multiply that times 8, and that's going to equal to 40 pints. That's how much you need. You need 40 pints. Now let's see how much paint you already have. You have 3 quarts, which if I multiply that by 2, I'm going to get pints. So I'm going to multiply that by 2. That's going to give me 6 quarts. Plus the 1 pint you already had. Plus, sorry, not 6 quarts, 6 pints. It's going to give me pints. Plus the 1 pint I already had. That means that you already have 7 pints. So you have 7 pints. If I subtract the ones I have from the ones that I need, I'll know how many I'm missing. So in this case, we're missing 33 pints. Now, this is a perfectly fine answer. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you want to change this into like quarts and pints or gallons and pints, that's fine. If you wanted to change it to quarts, you would have to like divide this by 4. Sorry, by 2, because there's 2 pints in 1 quart. So we would divide this by 2 and we would end up with you would end up with 16 quarts and 1 pint, because 32 divided by 2 is 16, and then you have 1 left over. Or if you were going to gallons, you would have to divide this by 8. 33 divided by 8, that's the same thing as 32 divided by 8 plus 1. So that would be 4 gallons and 1 pint, because you just have 1 little pint left over. So any of these 3 answers would be perfectly fine. Any questions on this one? Anything you need me to clarify? No.
Hold up. Let me just take a picture of that.
Sure.
All right.
Okay. A 55-pound bag of soil can hold 1/2 cubic foot of soil. In order to fill a square box measuring 4 feet long and 1 foot high, how many bags of soil must be used? Well, there's a tiny clue in this problem that is going to tell you what you need to calculate. Who can tell me what that little clue is? They give you a clue of what you need to calculate.
Is it the bag?
Bag in the soil.
The bag of soil? What about the bag of soil? It's something that has to do with the bag of soil, but it's not necessarily the bag. It's something they meant.
Ah,
What was that?
Big job. You better wait for Vance. It's a big job.
So the tiny clue in this is cubic foot. Oops. Cubic foot. What is that hinting at? When do you need to use cubic feet?
Volume.
Yes, ma'am. That is a little hint to you that you're going to need to calculate volume. Whenever they mention cubic feet, cubic inches, cubic meters, cubic anything, any unit that is to the 3rd power, or in other words, cubic, is hinting that you need to calculate volume. So what do they mention in this problem? They mention that you're going to fill in a square flower box. So it's a square, meaning all 4 sides measure the same. And obviously it's a box, so it has a little bit of depth to it. So here's your box. Now, they tell you that this flower box measures 4 feet long, so 4 feet, and 1 foot high, so the depth of it is 1 foot. But they don't tell you the width. What would be the width of this flower box? They tell you the length, they tell you the height, but they don't tell you the width. What is the width?
4 feet too.
Yes, ma'am, it's 4, because it's a square. So they don't tell you the width, but you can assume that it would have to be the same as the length, because it's a square. So we're going to need to calculate the total volume of this box. So the volume is going to be length times width times height, which would be 4 times 4 times 1, which would be 16 cubic feet. So why did you need that? You needed to know the total volume because the rate that they give you depends on volume. They tell you that one bag can do 1/2 cubic feet. But in total, you have 16 cubic feet, and you need to figure out how many bags you're going to need. Now, the fact that the bag can hold 55 pounds, you couldn't care less. You couldn't care less that it can hold 55 pounds because you're not doing anything with the pounds. That's just extra information there to confuse you. So with our proportion, we're going to go ahead and cross multiply and divide. And yes, you do have the choice of changing that 1/2 into a decimal if you want to. It's going to be the same answer in the end. Personally, I think it's a little waste of time, but if you prefer working with decimals, that's fine. So the X number of bags would equal to 16 times 1, everything divided by 1/2. Keep, change, flip. So you're going to need 32 bags. That's how many bags you're going to need for this flower bed. So again, anytime you see that they mention cubic feet, cubic inches, anything cubic, that's hinting at volume. Anytime you see squared, like squared inches, squared feet, square meters, what is that hinting at?
Area.
Yes. So whenever you see cubic or through the third power, that's volume. Whenever you see squared or to the second power, that's area. So keep that in mind because it's very common for them to say kind of something and they hint at things like that. It's like little details. All right, so these questions that I have here are some math knowledge practice because I know one of you guys mentioned you wanted to do some math knowledge. So let's take a look at this very first one. So for this very first one, we have that 5x is equal to 30, and we just need to figure out the value of x. So this is a pretty straightforward algebra equation. All you need to do is one little thing. What's the one little thing you got to do to find x?
Divide.
We're going to divide both sides by 5 because currently it's being multiplied by 5. So the opposite would be to divide. So the answer is 6. Pretty straightforward. The next one says, what is the product of a minus 5 and a plus 3? What does product mean? What do we have to do?
You have to multiply.
Yes, product means multiply. Okay, so we're just going to multiply a minus 5 times a plus 3. In this, we can use something called foiling, and foiling is just like, it's a little acronym to just help you remember the order. So foiling just means multiply the first ones, a times a squared. Multiply the outer ones, a times 3 would be 3a. Multiply the inner ones, that would be negative 5a. And multiply the last ones, negative 15. And now you can combine these two because they both have a and a has the same exponent. Remember that in order to combine like terms, not only do they need the same variable, but the variable has to have the same exponent. That's why we're not combining the first one. So the first one stays the same, plus, or actually minus, positive 3a minus 5a would be negative 2a, and then the minus 15. And that's it.